Okay, I think I should be online. But it's telling me I'm not. Let's take a quick look. I am online. Alright, good news. Hello everyone! We have got Assassin's Creed Unity on. I always need a little trouble. So, again, for the benefit of those who don't stream, or who do stream, I have to play the game in a windowed mode because of my resolution, and I need to play it with VSync on because otherwise it takes all the available resources on the computer, including those that are designed to encode my stream. And so what this basically turns into is I play the game through my OBS preview window, but unfortunately this results in little weird things like having to tab between a bunch of screens and being slightly out of sync and whatnot. But anyway, welcome. Obviously this is a slightly earlier start for the stream, and then a very early start for most of my Fridays, where I know I tend to be a little bit later, or sometimes a lot later, for my start time. My Fridays kind of turned a bit into not exactly a free day, but a kind of a time where I spend a little bit more, or I'm a little less diligent in terms of keeping a schedule, just so I can get some other things taken care of. I'll always stream when I can, at least, but I don't quite feel the I think I've basically been able to section off a little bit of time for myself to get things done while still being able to get a cast, and sometimes that means that I need to start later than I planned. Before I jump into the story, I am gonna try and get whatever whatever newspapers I can, because that gives me a chance to read things. And I will probably have a slightly earlier departure time. So basically the stream will probably be a bit slower than I planned. Oh. But just I had a prior commitment, so I wanted to make sure that I got a cast in that didn't start at like midnight. But that is going to translate into me having to run off for a little bit. So anyways, let's start by reading some newspapers, get some context about what's going on, and then we will try and get a chapter down. So, Journal de Paris, 1792. Following the mayhem at Tuileries Palace, the Legislative Assembly has taken the unprecedented step of suspending the king. He is under heavy guard in the temple with the rest of the royal family. La Lanterne, whose popular wrath explodes for years, the people have walked under the halo of the lanterns. Their hunger, their restlessness, their hopes for a fairer tomorrow, never once illuminated by the flicker of lamplight. Today, they are using those same lanterns to answer their thirst for justice. Citizen Chappe has demonstrated with great success the use of his newest communications technology. Messages between Paris and Lille have been relayed at astonishing speed, hours literally, a miracle of modern science. Good citizen Sanson, the executioner of Paris, requests donations of old rags and other cloths no longer needed for the mopping up of excess blood upon the guillotine's gibbet. It's quite a hazardous work environment, but you can help. Murderous giant. Another absurd report has emerged of a lethal giant who stalks the alleyways just off the Cour des Miracles. Citizens of the neighborhood call him the Giant Iscariot, but we call him an illusion suffered by those who have been given too much to drink. So I think if those headlines are any indication, I suspect that means that we're about to get to the bits of the French Revolution that everybody remembers, namely guillotines, King Louis and Marie Antoinette being executed, and the sort of stuff that you see in the Tale of Two Cities. So I have an event literally right in front of me, or I can go picking up chests. I think I'll do the event. I'll do the story, and then if I get a chance to if I got a chance to do something else. I don't know, we'll figure it out. I am a little curious, so somebody told me that I should have seen Napoleon by this point. Oh. By this point. I don't recall running into him. Oh, did I miss the opportunity to cause some trouble? Fair enough. And then... So yeah, somebody said that I'm supposed to encounter Napoleon, which I haven't. And then the Marquis de Sade obviously came up during the segment with you know, when we were looking, we were at the Cour des Miracles, but we haven't really seen him since. Anyway. I'm slightly tempted to try and get better gear, but I'll I think I'm gonna save my pennies and see what we can see if we can get something really nice. I didn't really play that much between the last two times, so there's a lot of stuff I haven't picked up. Okay, the King's correspondence. The King is in possession of certain letters that might incriminate the assassins. Find them and destroy them before the mob gets a hold of them.
You summoned?
Monsieur Dorian, we have a task for you.
More fetch and carry work, I imagine.
2 master assassins are dead, one by your own hand in defense of a Templar. Count yourself lucky this is the extent of your punishment.
And Germain?
It's none of your concern. Last night, the Paris Commune declared itself an open insurrection against the king. As we speak, 20,000 armed revolutionaries are laying siege to the Tuileries. Even the National Guard are on the brink. Some of them have thrown in with the revolutionaries. France is splitting at the seams.
And this doesn't please us? The people are fighting for what is owed them. Liberté, égalité.
If we danced about on a simple scale in need of balancing, you'd be right. But the truth is more complicated. In putting Mirabeau's affairs in order, we've come across certain correspondences of a royal nature.
Mirabeau's in contact with the king.
And he was rather less discreet than he should have been. If the king's copies of these letters were made public, the Templars would be in a position to expose and purge our agents across France.
And I'm to slip in and find them first.
And quickly. The Swiss Guard are badly outnumbered. It's likely they'll be overwhelmed before nightfall.
Won't be the first palace I've broken into.
Ready? Aim! Fire! Good work. Back to your posts.
I wonder if there's a... Okay, I was wondering if there was going to be like another investigation that I need to do, so... I'll see. These seem reasonably straightforward to get. Cover kills and alarm bell sabotage. But...
Quality of rhetoric amongst bloodthirsty rioters these days.
The Swiss Guard. The Swiss Guards were a regiment of Swiss mercenaries hired to protect the French sovereign and his places of residence. I admire the Swiss. I feel almost half Swiss. I'd make a better argument for Swiss cheese being the best in the world, but it would probably be full of holes. These Swiss regiments were highly sought after in Europe since the Swiss cantons were reputed to produce good, obedient, and ferocious soldiers. By the end of the 15th century, the Swiss 100 Guard, Cent Suisse, was created and regularly stationed in Paris. By the middle of the 18th century, the protection of the Champs-Élysées was entrusted to the detachment of 10 or so soldiers tasked with maintaining order and arresting lawbreakers. During the Revolution, members of the Swiss Guard would protect Louis XVI at the Château du Tuileries, but were overwhelmed and massacred on August 10, 1792, once the sovereign and his family had taken refuge. Once the sovereign and his family had taken refuge in the Salle du Ménager, where the National Convention was held, and where the monarch would later be judged. On reflection, might I quickly apologize for the Swiss cheese argument joke that I just made. I have not been feeling well lately. Okay. So I suspect we should be able to... Oh, maybe not. Uh-oh. I do really want to try and get the achievements if I can, but I'm really impatient too, so... You know what? Screw it. Oh crap, that's a lot of guys. Yeah, I really blew this. I should probably try and escape. I'm trying to get to that haystack if I can, but... No. I can't believe I got away with that.
Did he make a sharp turn, sir?
This is Assassin's Creed 2, they'd be poking the haystack, but...
You outstayed your welcome, so piss off!
So I have sabotaged no alarm bells, and I have gained no cover kills. Sounds about par for my playthroughs. Well... Alright, so at least I'll be able to get all that medicine back by looting these guys, but I'm not entirely sure this is how that mission's supposed to go. I will confess, sometimes I feel a little rushed to do missions, but that's not the reason I suck this time. I'm just bad. And I'm a little unlucky that I just got the one medicine, it looks like. Oh well. I do at least have an opportunity to take out some of the alarm bells. And it looks like the place is empty now. Oh, well, there's going to be another chance for a cover kill. Down, please. Thank you. Oh, Christ almighty. Okay, well, that was a... I don't know what that was, but that was definitely not intentional. TV Angel, thank you very much for the follow. I'm feeling rather ridiculous. Oh, and that doesn't count as a cover kill. I hope you are doing well. Actually occurred to me by pulling him into the haystack that also kept me from getting the loot. Anyway, I wanted to be a little more on the ball for the details. So, the Palais des Tuileries, originally a separate palace, the Tuileries was united with the Louvre Palace under Henry IV. The original Tuileries was the result of a caprice of Catherine de' Medici, who found the Louvre too big, too cold, and too crowded. She turned her attentions to the former tile factory on the other side of the ditch, which she would transform into the palace of her dreams. Since the land was vacant, there was no one to expropriate. Posh person's word, meaning forcibly turf out. Over the centuries, the Tuileries Garden would become much like an amusement park, the highlight of which came when Jacques-Alexandre César Charles launched the world's first hydrogen-filled balloon there. 400,000 people filled the garden embankment's roofs and the palace of Louis XV. The entry fee was 3 sous. 9 years later, the mood was decidedly less friendly to Louis XVI, when he and his family had to take refuge in the Salle du Ménage, having escaped a mob of insurgents who invaded the Tuileries on August 10, 1792. A revolutionary day that brought the monarchy's downfall. What was once Queen Catherine's Park had become the Republic's melting pot, with 2 little stars which I don't think go anywhere for us. Thank you very much for that, host, The Eyes of Sin. I don't know if you are in here right now, but I hope you are well. And if you are, feel free to say hello, and I'll say nice things about you. Mostly. Alright, let's see if there's anybody else. I don't think... Nope. Christ.
That's right. Damn, who's killed you then?
Let's see if I can be sneaky. You can do it, Arno. I believe in you. I don't think a ledge will count as a cover kill, but... Jesus. Hello, The Eyes of Sin. How are you doing? Thank you for stopping by and making this place a little less lonely. Sorry, your hands are full typing up a retweet. Oh, and I don't have my phone by me, so I completely missed whatever you wrote, but I'm sure it was lovely. And I'm very happy to hear that you are doing fine. Surprise! Okay, the cover kills are surprisingly easy to do. For those of you who don't know The Eyes of Sin, and I know this isn't a great time to do that because we're early on in the cast, but I do want to take a moment to mention the fact that she is responsible for the lovely emotes that I have. Not lovely because I chose them, but lovely because she made them. And I particularly like highlighting it because she was given a fairly open, I don't know, like, request. I mentioned a couple of things that would be good, And I was more vague than I would like to be, but I wasn't 100% sure quite how to go about requesting these things. And she did an unbelievable job of it. Ooh, I bet I can jump on these guys. I bet I can jump on these guys. I bet I can jump on these guys. Do it, you coward. Maybe I'll get him on the other way around. But yeah, she did a really wonderful job of them, and she does do this for a living, so if you happen to have any needs for emotes or just want a fancy sketch made of someone you know and or like, I can highly recommend her because she got them done quite quickly, and she got them done well. Alright, well, so much for that. Ah, crap, he's gonna hit the bell. Getting slightly better at parrying. Not getting so good at dealing with the pistol shots, though. Jesus. I'm blaming you, Johnny. Although I'm pretty bad at this, so. I really just want to stop him from ringing that bell. Nope. I actually love that it starts to ring and you successfully stop it. That's a nice touch. Oof. These guys are definitely tougher than the entry-level enemies. Problem is I forget how to do the oh, that's awesome. Oh, Jesus. I don't know what I did, but that was amazing. I can't remember what my body check was. Anyways, you cannot see me. Surprise! Please hit him. Okay, I can handle 3. Can I ever handle 3? But yeah, so I also wanted to say my hope, I know Sin and I have talked about playing some stuff on cast, and I need to figure out if there's something that would be good for a co-cast or not. But she does do streaming in her own right, and I think she's bound and determined to learn Stellaris, so maybe I can try and give her a hand learning that. But a really lovely person who, in addition to being good at art and somebody who I can recommend if you ever are looking for emotes or, again, just general design stuff, is somebody who's a lot of fun to watch and hang out with. So please do check out her channel. And then, of course, my favorite caster on Twitch. We have got Johnny Big Time. Johnny has finished Assassin's Creed Unity, and I rather like that he tolerates this game, even though it's not his favorite. I am, sorry, I'm like on the verge of sneezing if I sound like really halting in terms of how I talk. I'm trying not to, but it's tricky. Hello, Paint Bucket. But Johnny is, again, he's a ton of fun. He is somebody I have a lot of respect for when it comes to his ability to sort of pull off an entertaining cast. But more than that, he is somebody who has got I think he's got a great taste in games and an ability to play them well. I think one of the things that he is not appreciated nearly enough for is his ability to... Damn it. Excuse me. Look at that. Look at that gun just hanging in midair. One of the things I really like about Johnny is how open-minded he is with games, but also I really can't say enough how he takes to them like a fish to water. He really knows how to get into a game and figure out how it works. I mean, even in Fortnite, like, he's somebody who I credibly imagine can win a given... That looks wild. That looks like the fire is kind of going in reverse. He's somebody who I kind of think that he could potentially win the round sort of at the start each time. So, you know, again, I'm not a big Fortnite guy, but he is definitely somebody who makes it enjoyable to watch. And I think that's one of the... I honestly think it's one of the best things that a broadcaster can do, because it's, you know, like, I'll be honest with you, especially with Assassin's Creed Unity, I don't think I've really been offering that much commentary in terms of the French Revolution or anything like that. Like, I kind of wish I could do this game a little bit better. But I think... you know, it's one thing, and I mean, this is a hobby for me, right? So it's one thing to just, you know, play a game and just hang out and show it to friends, right? That's totally fine. That's an absolutely legitimate reason to stream. That was amazing. But I think one of the things that's great about Johnny is that he treats it like a job. Like, every time he comes in, he is on. So in my case, you know, sometimes Assassin's Creed sort of ticks by and I wait for something that I can react to. And Johnny is someone who can just, you know, sit down with a game. Even if it's a game that he doesn't enjoy that much, he is able to wring out some entertainment of the game and really understand how it works. It's a skill that he has that I have a lot of respect for, and that's the reason why I find him the most the most enjoyable streamer. And for a long time I called him one of my favorites, but honestly, like, out of everything on Twitch, Johnny is easily my favorite caster, and I probably should have said that about him a lot sooner. And Eyes of Sin says we could do something ridiculous for a stream, like a co-voice, a visual novel, or a dating sim. I haven't played either one of those, and you'd love to get me to play Doki Doki Literature Club. I've heard of that game. A lot of people seem to be streaming it, but I have not partook myself. Mind you, all of these nice evaluations of Johnny Big Time will change if he ever unsubscribes to me, so fair warning. I'm kidding. I did get a slightly later start than I was planning, and the reason for that... Cool. A reason for that, I was trying to do another blog post. This one is on hot takes. But it'll probably take me a while to finish. I know I hit the parry button. I'm mad I had to use that medicine. Hold still, let me loot you. I will say, based on some of the text, I have a feeling that we're actually getting on to like the revolution that everybody sort of remembers or thinks of. And so I've started to get back to quoting A Tale of Two Cities in the stream titles. And if you guys have not read it, I rather like it. I think some people say it's like, you know, leave it to Charles Dickens to come up with a, you know, I don't want to say pulpy, but like a Dickensian take on the French Revolution.
Back.
But you know what?
Back. Stay away.
Okay. I'm not sure if that guy shot himself or what. Anyways, sometimes I just want to enjoy a book. And I think Tales of Two Cities is a really good book. I also really like the ending. It's like the really famous ending too, but it's good.
You certainly don't look like a blood-crazed revolutionary. The hood is a bit sinister, though, if you don't mind my saying.
Serving as rear guard, are you? Convenient how that puts several
Is this
locked
Napoleon?
doors between you and the fighting.
Oh, I'm not here at all. Not officially, anyway. But how often does one find the opportunity to poke about in a king's private study?
Looking for anything in particular?
State secrets, private correspondences, personal treasures, that sort of thing.
I do hope we're not eyeing the same prize.
Name it.
Certain letters written to the king, ripe for misunderstanding, should the wrong men find them.
I see. Well, then perhaps we can help each other. I believe the king has built a hidden vault somewhere in here. If only we could find it.
Storguten, it is Napoleon. Yeah, so obviously, I think that's what people will normally associate Dickens with, and, you know, rightly so. But in this case, so naturally, I should really be quoting him more for Assassin's Creed Syndicate. But yeah, the Tale of Two Cities does take place in the French Revolution. It's the one that has a really long opening. Something it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was an age of you know what? I'm gonna look it up. I have a copy somewhere in the apartment, but Google will help me, and then we'll read. Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was a season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, we were all going direct the other way. So it's like an opening sentence and paragraph all at the same time. And then I feel like I can't say what the ending lines are because I like the ending quite a bit. And it does... I don't want to give away too much. But yeah, if you guys are looking for something to read, it is obviously a little bit older. So if you guys... I mean, he's the guy who wrote A Christmas Carol, though. So, I don't know. It's... I think it's pretty accessible, but A Tale of Two Cities, I think it's a pretty solid book. Yeah, me and my hot takes. Charles Dickens' one of his most famous books is pretty okay. All right, Napoleon Bonaparte. He would have, had he been born a few weeks earlier, Napoleon would have been Italian. What a terrifying thought. He was born in the Italianized version of his name Bonaparte on the island of Corsica, which belonged to Genoa until the Genoese sold their rights to the French crown. The skinny Napoleon had a difficult adolescence. Badly dressed and with a heavy Corsican accent, his rustic manners were out of place among the smart young nobles who attended the same military school as he did. The future emperor, the Buddha Jacobean, was a bad boy who was often absent. In 6 years, he notched up 38 months of leave for 33 months of presence under the French flag. So, in fact, he was quite Italian then. In 1791, he spent several months in Corsica to help Pasquale Paoli, a Corsican liberator who would go on to hate and distrust the Bonaparte family. He exceeded his leave of absence and was struck off on January 1st, 1792. Although a civilian once more, he was promptly appointed colonel of a battalion of volunteers who would fire on demonstrators protesting against the civil constitution of the clergy. Without being ordered to do so, he took the citadel of Ajaccio? I don't know. You say self-motivated, I say rude. Later, he took part in the revolutionary days of the 20th of June and August the 10th, 1792. His participation in the siege of Toulon, although he did not take the city all by himself, and his mastery of artillery gained him the admiration of Augustin Robespierre, younger brother of the revolutionary leader Maximilien Robespierre, who appointed him brigadier general and put him in command of the artillery of France's army of Italy. Following the failed royalist putsch of 13 Vendémiaire, where under the orders of Paul Barras, whose mistress he would go on to marry, he gunned down the Voltigeurs, he returned to Italy, this time as general-in-chief. It was during the next 4 years that his life forever changed. Better than anyone, he knew how to exploit his victories and cover up his defeats for the sake of public opinion. In France, everyone remembered the Battle of the Pyramids, which he won, while hardly anyone remembered the Battle of Aboukir Bay, which he lost. Widely recognized by the age of 30, he sought neither to be an aristocrat nor a revolutionary. When his mother reprimanded him, one day he famously replied, "Eu sono imperatore." In 1799, he affirmed, "Io sono Bonaparte." He had become second to none. He had also mostly lost his Corsican accent. It's everything in here is accurate so far as I can understand, but that's a really disjointed biography of him. And Storguten says, I have a steady pile of books on my bedroom windowsill. I won't make it this summer, I think. Your New Year's resolution is to read classics. Well, yeah, it's, I mean, I have the same problem myself. I'm slightly fortunate in that I haven't unpacked most of my boxes here. So I kind of get to pick them apart in some semi-arbitrary order in terms of while I'm unpacking them, but I still feel kind of guilty in terms of the stuff that I haven't touched yet. And apparently there is something on Pierre Bellec. Born in New France sometime around 1740, Pierre Bellec joined the French colonial militia when he was age 16 at the start of the 7 Years' War. He served with some distinction, earning a commendation for valor at the Battle of Fort Bull, but mustered out and traveled to France in 1762. As luck would have it, just barely missing a massive purge of the colonial branch of the Brotherhood by the Templars. Don't worry, those don't happen anymore. Well, hardly ever. You know what? Lock your doors just to be safe. He seems to have settled in Paris, judging by the numerous arrest records in his name over the next 2 decades. He may have been at the Bastille in 1789, but no conclusive proof naming him as one of the prisoners has ever surfaced. He died under peculiar circumstances in April of 1791. Reportedly, his body was found strangely garbed in the upper chapel of the Sainte-Chapelle Cathedral. To this day, the surest way to start a fight in a room of assassin historians is to shout, "Bellec was right!" or really, "Bellec was wrong." Either that or to kick the shins. Many assassin historians have phenomenally weak shins.
You were saying?
Very nicely done, my friend. Incredible.
Find your prize.
A cornucopia, yes. And you?
That's got to be a piece of Eden.
So, yes. This is it. That should take care of that.
May I suggest we leave? Quickly.
What is that? Our way out.
Cover me, would you?
Yeah, I thought an interesting choice here, Paint Bucket. I mean, so there's no escaping the fact that these guys are, like, all of the characters sort of have British accents. But what would have been interesting was, because Napoleon obviously had this this insecurity regarding his status as a Corsican, it would have been interesting if they gave him a non-British accent. Like, Scottish would be a little weird, but like if they gave him maybe a more American accent or something like that, that would have been an interesting way of sort of making it consistent, rather than him sounding like a, you know, Arno was like raised in Versailles, right? So in this case, you can sort of get this idea that he has maybe an aristocratic style, which we normally associate with British accents.
Where did you learn to fight? Ah, there! Just a bit longer.
Actually, I heard apparently he was bullied at school for his nationality. Just want to loot these bodies, but...
Let's go.
Also,
Search everything. I want those documents.
from my understanding, Napoleon wasn't particularly short.
Yes, Captain Rui has that effect on people.
Friend of yours?
Persistent thorn I haven't quite managed to pluck out.
He has information I need. I need to get back up there.
In this mess, you'll never find him again. Come with me, I have a better idea.
The nickname...
You handled yourself well back there. I don't suppose you've ever considered military service?
Yeah, the nickname the Little Emperor, I believe, was came from the fact that his bodyguards were unusually tall, and so it gave him the appearance of being shorter, but that's because he was surrounded by really tall and big people rather than... Captain Frederic Rouy joined the Garde Française in 1789, just in time to witness the beginning of the Revolution. As the son of a poor cobbler, Rouy had no hope of advancement into the aristocratic officer corps of the Guard, and by the accounts of his contemporaries, Rouy himself left no letters or journals behind that may have been illiterate. The rhetoric of the Revolution found a true believer in him. When the bulk of the Garde Française defected to the Garde Nationale, Rouy was among them. He rose quickly through the ranks, unhindered by his lack of aristocratic breeding, and along with Saint-Pierre was one of the key figures in the storming of the Tuileries Palace. He is also a violent, sadistic monster who used revolutionary fervor as an excuse to murder and pillage all his way across France. But we all have our faults. I mean, I chew my nails.
I'm not much for following orders.
Ah, the bane of generals and statesmen everywhere. An individualist. I know the feeling. Men like us have a great advantage over most in the army. You see, we can think for ourselves.
I'm
If
missing
you
it.
joined up today, you'd be a marshal in 10 years, guaranteed.
A generous offer, but no.
Where the heart leads, a man must follow. Look me up if you ever change your mind. Bonaparte is my name. Napoleon Bonaparte. Second Lieutenant of Artillery. For now.
Arno Dorian.
A pleasure. And as a personal favor, if anyone asks, I was never here. Watch the whole thing from a furniture shop across the carousel.
A face in the crowd. Of course.
One thing I do notice, they have these reveals of people. So, you know, Napoleon just introduced himself, but of course you got to find out that he was Napoleon
Just a moment.
when the objectives in the database comes up.
You may want to take cover.
Okay, this doesn't count as cover, apparently. Jesus. Hello, Commander Root. Thank you very much for the follow.
Fine, Corporal. Superb shot. Regular drills are critical to a regiment's success.
We should be going, sir.
We part ways here.
What about Rui?
Give me a few days. I'll see what I can learn of his current posting. Perhaps I can arrange an introduction. be well?
I do rather like that introduction. It's kind of funny. I was mentioning how the Marquis de Sade was like introduced for one segment and then sort of dropped. I kind of hope Napoleon, it seems like he's sort of on his way to being something a little more consistent, but I'm going to take a second here and get a viewpoint and just generally babble to anyone who will listen. And then we'll go back to more story events. I mean, I killed them after the murder, but... No, hi. Really, I'm just doing this for the extra medicine. But yeah, I'm glad that there are people to confirm hearsay about Napoleon, because I wish I knew better. Funny thing is, my favorite filmmaker is Stanley Kubrick, and Napoleon, it was one of his very famous unrealized film projects. And apparently he had a filing cabinet full of basically every detail of his life. He basically had Napoleon tracked down virtually to the day in terms of where he was and what he did. But for one reason or another, the project could never be realized. The closest he got was Barry Lyndon, which it's really funny. There's a great Simpsons clip. I don't know what episode it is, but somebody showed me a Simpsons clip, which is just a complete homage to Kubrick films. And it has this moment where there's it's a Barry Lyndon reference, and one of the characters says, "Even I don't know what this is referencing," which is a shame because Barry Lyndon is actually, I think, one of the most underappreciated Kubrick films. His original intention was to do an adaptation of Vanity Fair, but apparently felt that, again, I love these vistas, apparently felt that Barry Lyndon was sort of a little bit easier to adapt to, or was actually possible to adapt to film, where, well, I mean, the name is like I think it's something like the Memoirs of Barry Lyndon Esquire or something like that, but I think he wound up feeling that Vanity Fair could not be done as a film. La Patriote, 1792. In an unprecedented move, the Assembly have decreed that Citizen Mirabeau will be given a state funeral in the Abbey of Church of Saint Genevieve. Now known to be as the Pantheon, it will serve as the final resting place of the heroes of the Revolution. Once the King's Minister of the Treasury and much-loved public figure, Jacques Necker, is leaving Paris in disgrace. His attempted reforms, as popular as they once were, came too late and changed too little to avert the recent upheaval. We say good riddance to the Swiss meddler. Lafayette acquitted. Despite massive pressure from the people, the Assembly has voted in his favor. Citizens are encouraged to respect the law. Many members have since been abused and intimidated, which, though natural considering public opinion, must end. Our brothers in Liege have are once more defeated by the feudal tyrant Habsburgs. They will not quit, however. The spirit of liberty once tasted by the people cannot be suppressed. France hears your cries, brothers. And the Chevalier d'Eon, showman and swordsman, we are at a loss for words. Should these pages be singing in the glory of his exquisite taste in dresses, or the unique finesse of his deadly swordplay? The Chevalier d'Eon has dumbfounded us once again. Who's mad at me? Oh. It's a good shot. Okay, this is This sucks. I can't actually hit those guys. Ow. Again, I have something to be able to like to body check these guys. I just don't remember how to do it. So as fun as that was, I have a feeling that there wasn't quite the TLC that was put into fighting on different levels than they'd intended. Alright, that was a fun diversion, but I did get my sync point, and let's see if I can... It's so interesting that I've gotten through so much of the story and I've been able to ignore, like, this half of Paris. Mind you, that's also because I haven't been doing the side missions on stream, so let's see where our next story mission is, because I don't have as much time to cast today. Ah. Oh, I'm in the right area. September Massacres. Roy and his men are storming Le Grand Chalet prison and executing prisoners. Find him and stop him. So, if I get a chance to, like, steal some stuff or open chests, I'll do it. Oh, actually, I'm also going to take a second and level up some of my skills. I need to complete sequence 9. Okay. Sure. Thicker skin. But yeah, so if I get a chance to steal something, I'll take it, but I won't go out of my way to I won't go out of my way to, like, seek out any of the chests or anything like that. One thing that's so interesting, so obviously, I mean, the crowds on this thing are great. I still think that's such an impressive feature of this this particular title. But it is kind of interesting that they do become a little bit of a nuisance, and so it's an incentive to it's a bit of an incentive to take the high road. And I will take the high road, but I want my chest first. So the other thing that's kind of fun, you do get points for doing, or you should get points for doing that. Apparently not. Ah, there we go. Fast lift. The thing is that I remember last time I was playing this, I was trying to use these lifts and I would never move up. They would always, like, make me. It always kind of, like, make me. What's the term? Like, I jump onto the wall and start climbing, which is usually not what I want to do. Climbing, this is the funny thing, like, as fun as I think Assassin's Creed is, climbing the walls is not particularly fun. It's usually when you're, like, you know, parkouring your way over the rooftops rather than... Alright.
This morning, I was accosted by 3 men carrying some poor soul's head atop a pike. Seems they mistook my uniform for a mark of nobility and demanded I shout, "Long live the Republic," to prove my allegiance.
I suppose handing out tricolor cockades is now passé. What did you do?
I shouted, "Long live the Republic."
A man of principle.
Life is more valuable than dignity. But this is what happens when you give command of the government to half-starved lunatics and command of the army to bloodthirsty savages. Rui. I wanted him assigned to some out-of-the-way garrison, but the man redefines the term friends in high places. He's untouchable.
But you know where I can find him.
Rumor about the barracks is that he and a unit of his cronies plan on marching on the Grand Châtelet this afternoon. If he were to meet with an accident, few in France would suffer. My career certainly wouldn't.
Well, practice your speech-making.
I think this is a good example of why I'm disappointed that this game has the reputation that it does, because this period of time has so many interesting characters and just different events that occurred. Like, so here's a fun little bit of trivia about philosophers. Oh, I'll wait till after the cinematic.
Get their weapons. Nobody try anything. Come on, boys! Find me a warden!
I do like these setups. Assassinate Rui. Explore the area, create opportunities, 5 entrances, 2 collectibles, 1 secret entrance, and 40 guards. And given my track record, I have a feeling I'm just going to wind up butchering them all. But yeah, so here's a bit of fun trivia for you. Immanuel Kant, the Critique of Pure Reason guy, holy crap, there's a lot of things that happen. Okay, I'm going to do some database reading before I do this mission, but so there's a couple of bits of trivia. So the first one was that he was so regular in his habits that you could actually set your watch by the time that he walked by. Now, I was a little surprised knowing this bit of information that that's not the whole story. Apparently, he had a lot of trouble waking up in the morning, which I have a lot of sympathy for. And apparently he basically had, so he was Prussian, and his manservant Lamp was a former army officer, I think. Anyways, ex-army. And essentially his orders were to wake him at this certain time sharp and not to let up. Like, he had to insist that that Kant was out of bed by that time. The one time that Kant missed his regular... so he'd always be walking by reading the paper. And apparently the one time that he was not on time for the time that he would walk by was when the French Revolution broke out. Which I also think is a really interesting indicator. Because, of course, he's the author of the pamphlet, What is Enlightenment? Does it count as a pamphlet? Anyway, the work. So I think it's also kind of a good example of this figure that people tend to associate with very sort of austere and regular kind of philosophy, and yet somebody who wrote this work on the Enlightenment, essentially defining Enlightenment, that's sort of recognizing this event for what it is, it being the only thing to sort of disturb his very regular habits. Anyways. The military situation of 1792 was deteriorating, although the Duke of Brunswick, commander-in-chief of the German army, had made his way through Lorraine into French soil. It was the defeat at Verdun on September 2nd, 1792 that scared the French deputies. With a sword of Damocles hanging over the head of Paris, a great many revolutionaries called for a radical purge of all opposition. Among them was Marat, who exclaimed, rise up, let the blood of the traitors flow." In a similar vein, Danton memorably affirmed against the Duke of Brunswick and the invaders, "We need audacity, yet more audacity, and always audacity, and France shall be saved." Quite an auspicious thing to say. He's setting a good example. At this time, the prisons were filled with thousands of men and women, some hostile to the revolution, such as non-juring priests and former aristocrats, but also common law criminals and lunatics. Fearing that the prisons were a veritable nest of traitors waiting to strike at Paris from within, even as Brunswick invaded from without, the revolutionaries made for the prisons and began murdering anyone even remotely suspected of counter-revolutionary sentiment. Between 1090 and 1395, prisoners were killed before the massacres finally ceased. These outbursts of punitive violence had left their mark on the Parisians, although a number of deputies insisted that these actions had been necessary. In the provinces, they engendered disapproval and horror with regard to Paris, but they also spread terror among potential opponents. The Lavoisin poisonings. Catherine de Lavoisin, 1640 to 1680, began her career as a fortune teller, but quickly expanded her services to help make her clients' fortunes come true. Indulging in both alchemy and black masses, she concocted a particularly subtle and effective poison that had no smell and left no trace. She employed it using an array of trick jewelry built with hidden compartments. Catherine had no love for her husband, nor her sons for that matter, and was said to have attempted, or at least plotted, to poison them. Must have been a relaxing home to grow up in. Her daughter, Marguerite Montvoisin, on the other hand, seems to have joined in Catherine's plots, the most famous of which was a series of scandals known as the Affair of the Poisons. Why'd they call it that? According to certain information collected by the authorities tasked with unmasking the conspiracy, Lavoisin and a certain Madame de Montespan, once the king's official mistress, plotted against King Louis XIV. Lavoisin was convicted of the conspiracy, and on February 22, 1680, she was condemned to death and burned at the Place de Grève in Paris. Her daughter survived to carry on the family traditions. What an inspiring story of hope against the odds. The death of Mirabeau. On April 2nd, 1791, Henri Gabriel Riquetti Mirabeau lay on his deathbed. The 42-year-old was exhausted from his excessive drinking and womanizing. Has anyone ever been so exhausted from womanizing that they have to go straight to their deathbed? I mean, that's actually quite impressive. I think I'd probably have been standing at the end of his bed as he went, applauding. Mirabeau had been a double agent since the Estates General of 1789. He had received money from Louis XVI in return for his advisory services, and to make sure that the revolution would never overthrow the monarchy. An impassioned speaker who always was willing to stand up to his enemies, his death caused a considerable amount of dismay in Paris. He was seen as a potential minister as well as a first-rate thinker. His ashes were later transferred to the Pantheon. And yet, in 1792, when an iron chest was discovered at the Tuileries Paris containing correspondence between Louis XVI and, among others, Mirabeau, the latter was immediately discredited and removed from the Pantheon. And the 10th of August. On August 6, 1792, a crowd gathered at the Champ de Mars once more to petition the king's deposition. An atmosphere of besiegement reigned in Paris, but it was not against foreign enemies that the insurgents sought to defend themselves, but those from within, those who were in a position to derail the revolution. Jacobins and Cordeliers took refuge in Paris City Hall, along with the 7,000 soldiers. The king strengthened his positions at the Tuileries Palace from about 2,000 to 3,000 men, mainly Swiss guards. On the night of August the 10th, with the monarchy just hours from its impending doom, the Toscan sounded to mark the beginning of the revolt. The insurgents wanted to ensure that the king would be unable to retain his rights. The fighting was swift and brutal. The Swiss Guard were massacred almost to a man. The king, meanwhile, took advantage of the confusion to slip away from the palace and place himself in the hands of the National Convention. Funny how the noble are rarely the first to act nobly. Ultimately, the assault led to the demise of the Legislative Assembly, the formal abolition of the monarchy, and the creation of the National Convention. It would also lead less directly to the September massacres a month later, which we are currently experiencing. All right. So I guess I have to jump down before So it says it's an opportunity, but it doesn't say. Okay, so that looks, yeah, this is on the higher end, so I should probably start with that. Nope. I can't scale up. walls like that? What a surprise. Okay. Maybe I should take care of the lower level. Sorry about the lag. It looks like I'm running into a few problems. They're not perfectly fixed by my current solution. Okay, those are ropes. I was wondering, is like, man, what happened to the model for that pig? I thought they were all like separate separate segments. I was wondering if I don't know, whatever intern they got to do the pig. Holy smokes, this is... It's funny, it's completely smooth on my monitor, but it's brutal on the... Or like on... So when I look at the actual... game, I'm still getting the black stutters, but it hasn't dropped below 60 frames, and yet... Oh. Anyway, yeah, so this is happening. Apparently it's taken it's told OBS that it's not allowed to use my processor anymore. Ah, damn it. Okay, so hopefully all the guys searching for me will lighten up. Mo Mayan Tarkar, thank you very much for the follow. So I'd be really tempted to search those bodies, but obviously that's going to trigger... Oh, somebody's mad at me. Okay, so I can just sit here and farm creed points.
Voilà une puanteur qui frappe les esprits, pas le mélange habituel de crottin, de sueur et de crasse.
I'm assuming at some point these guys... Yeah. The thing is, from looking at their stance, I have a feeling that as soon as I walk by this gate, they're going to get mad again. The thing is, there doesn't seem to be any reason to go through the gate, so maybe I just run... Hey guys! Okay. I am mildly... I'll just give you guys a quick idea in terms of what's going on stream-wise. For reasons like what you're seeing right now, I am slightly tempted to buy a new monitor and to basically... like, I'll make it a dedicated streaming monitor. I'll make sure it's like a 16:9 one so that I can go... full screen for a given game and not have to worry about like you know, the weird aspects that come up. But the thing, like, the one problem is that I already built the PC for streaming, and there's a certain point where I need to say, like, you know, this is a fun hobby and all, but I don't want to like go out of my way and like buy a bunch of stuff. Like, that is more so for my own convenience. But if I want to play more games like Unity, which do suffer for sort of a lack of still no way up there, I don't think. If I do wind up playing more games like this, I'll probably move that purchase a little bit higher up the list. just to make sure that I don't run into... I basically don't run into this. Okay, this is funny. So... I want to basically go right through this wall, and yet I don't think this will let me climb up. Yeah. There was that area that the revolutionary, these guys. Did he call me righty? That's funny. I guess the Republicans in this case are on the left side, not on the right. Alright. That was a fun diversion and all, but let's see if I can actually get some of these assistance and distraction opportunities out of the way. Okay, well, apparently I missed out on whatever clever way of doing this mission was. It's slightly too clever for me.
If they try anything, shoot them. You'll go to the guillotine for this. Keep an eye on them, bastards.
Okay, surely I should be able to do my...
No sudden movement.
There we go. Bonjour! That was all of them, right? Yeah. Oh, god damn it.
You can thank me by getting to the walls and stopping these killings.
You kind of wish the French Revolution was such, the French Revolution was such an interesting period. You kind of wish I had the opportunity to study it instead of the German unification under Bismarck. But mostly you know a lot about Scottish history. You know, it's kind of funny though, my experience, so Paintbucket, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, but the catch is that a lot of my history isn't even, like I really don't have that much European history at all. I probably know a little bit about sort of colonial times because, well, you know, I live in one of the colonies. But beyond that, I can't really say I'm that knowledgeable about European history, despite the fact that it has some of the things that I find the most interesting, such as, you know, the Glorious Revolution, or, you know, or the French Revolution for that matter. It's a level 3 lock. Can't do anything about that. Or I'm sure I could if I wasn't bad at video games, but... Wonder if I can impale myself on these. No, they don't want me to jump onto the spikes. Fair enough. I wouldn't want to jump on those spikes either. But the one thing I do tend to find is that with the bits of history that I do know, I always wind up wishing that I learned something else. And then I go and I learn that thing, and then there's another bit of an interesting bit of history, which I also sort of wish that I knew. And it kind of continues on in that cycle. So I think what the lesson I probably should take from that is that history is full of really interesting... That is the one place I didn't want you to go, Arno. Basically, all of history is super interesting, and there's no getting around it, and you just have to read everything. Which is probably not that exciting of a revelation now that I think about it, but that's how I've tried to manage it. So I'll wait till he's done searching for me, but... I'm thinking This is, oh. No, it's not. Maybe I just don't go for the distraction opportunity. Apparently it's directly above me, but I can't climb up it. Told you this was going to be a clowny assassination. Yeah, I'll admit, this is not the easiest level to navigate. Okay, so this is two dead ends. There's stuff I can like seize, but alright, that's not exactly where I wanted to go. And I'm assuming I can't slide down into the, like, these look pretty closed off, so. The one real drawback with being out here is when the crowd... Nope.
I heard what you said. Fucking hell. What a mess. What do we do with the bodies? They'll be dead soon enough. Leave them. You revolutionary bastards! We don't need them.
I don't know if that guy was supposed to be alive or not. But with that in mind, Paint Bucket, like, I will say that the French Revolution really seems to be one of these events that just, like, it's impossible to underestimate its impact. Like, apparently it's just one of these ones where if you want to sort of understand, how the world sort of turned out the way that it did, apparently you just sit down and read about the French Revolution. And regrettably, I'm interested in it, but I definitely can't say that I know it well enough to understand why it's so important. I'm definitely fascinated by the ideas behind it, but being interested in the ideas is a little different than, it's a little bit different than sort of understanding the context. And, simple things like, why did the American Revolution, hello, Ben Skull, why did the American Revolution turn out the way that it did? Why was it, quote-unquote, successful, while the French one descended into the Reign of Terror, which is more or less where we're heading in this game? And then, the rise of Napoleon. Should we see that as a good thing, or inconsistent with the ideals of the revolution? Or both. I mean, the one thing that's worth mentioning is the laws that Napoleon introduced. Like when I do development economics, like whenever I read those papers, a lot of them will include a variable for the different legal systems, whether it was the French one or not, and the foundations laid by, I guess it's called the Napoleonic Code. Anyways, those are something that had a pretty profound impact. So I think the thing, it's one, it's lots of fascinating characters, but number two, it's also so big. So.
Hold fast, men. Cut them down. Protect the
And after a while of learning about some things, you get really repetitive here and there. So the only thing that you can take in about the Nazis. Oh yeah, no worries. Sounds like there's a lot of action going on there. Oh, hey guys. I'm assuming that was supposed to be some distraction I could just run through and take my target with, but. Oh, I see. So there's more guard. I get it now. That's an amazing kill animation. The worst thing is I have gotten lost in this area before. I'm just bad at games. Okay, I kind of wanted to take out both guys, and I'd kind of really like to be responding to what he's doing to me right now. There we go. But yeah, I mean, it's big history, it's big characters, and there's just so much of it. Which is why I'm kind of sad that Kubrick never made his Napoleon movie. Oh, for God's sake. Weimar, Germany. Gotcha. Now, I heard the story about the barrel of, or the wheelbarrow full of marks never actually happened. But it's such a good story.
Look, Warden, your brother's here to visit. Don't you want to see him? Come now, Warden. Let's have a cheer. Vive la Revolution!
Moderate scum! After him!
What's the matter? Not a fan of liberty? Freedom bores you?
Cancel the revolution!
So much for the stealthy approach.
He misses you. Tut tut, Warden. Your brother will think you rude. Mind, he's lost a bit of weight since last you saw him.
Okay, I'm gonna go to light the fire just because I kind of want to see what happens, and I might be able to get another... Oh!
Warden.
I might be able to get that last ledge kill.
I'm terribly sorry, Warden. Only, well, we couldn't find the rest of it.
There were cases of people burning marks as it was cheaper than coal. Yeah, actually, that makes sense to me. I suppose a slightly different example of commodity-based money. Owned. Ah!
I was right behind the bastard. He's just bloody
He
skunked
pissed
off,
off in a hurry.
Could have sworn I was just behind him.
Ah, no, that detail about inflation I did know, but more so because of my monetary economics course is less about, or monetary theory, less about supporting Argentina tomorrow with all that flag burning. I thought we were going to talk about inflation. I hate to admit it, but I am not a huge soccer fan, so I have no strong feelings about the World Cup. I will completely understand. Oh. I so deeply wish that I could assassinate the guy right now. I wonder if I can take both. I'm gonna trigger.
The real patriots! I won't give up! I will kill you! Banished the bloody mischief.
Anyway, seeing as he's looking for me, this will be helpful for the assassination. Argentina's playing France tomorrow, though. That's... Ah, I see. Yeah. You only watch the World Cup to see England lose. It's interesting. It looks like they've specifically programmed him not to... Oops. Looks like they specifically programmed him not to go close to the ledges so that you can't assassinate him, and then you have to do the interaction like kind of the death animation with him falling over the edge. Ah!
Wait a moment.
The least competent assassin in the Brotherhood. You kidding me? Who saw me? Jesus. Okay, so much for that approach.
Wait a minute. You can't point, maggot.
Since Brexit, you oppose them and everything. Yeah, the real shame about that one... I know, I try not to bring up Brexit a lot, especially for my British friends, just because it does seem, like, really depressing. I think the thing that bothers me the most about it is how, you know, especially with something that narrow, and, like, this is... So, a great example for me is, as a Canadian... as a Canadian, there's always sort of like that friendly rivalry with the States, but obviously now the United States is behaving in an overly aggressive and like really... That was a pretty good kill.
If you have orders to remove us from this hall, you must also get authority to use force. For we shall yield to nothing but bayonets!
To administer is to govern. To govern is to reign. That is the essence of the problem.
Mr. Mirabeau. Pathetic, isn't it? Surely France deserves better.
What was that? Roy, clean up your mess. It's time.
Told you I could make him talk.
You've done well, Captain. Read.
The price of grain is higher than ever, Grand Master. Our agents are in place to divert the shipments to our docks. They await only your command.
Good. Starve them. Through famine and fury, they will see their false masters for what they are, but do it gradually.
What you're asking will take at least a year, Grand Master. If not 2.
So I will admit, it's actually kind of neat the way... Sorry, I will get back to the politics stuff, because I know everybody loves it when streamers talk about politics, right? Ouch. Oh, I completely wasted the medicine for no reason. I will say, though, the one thing I like about the Assassin... So this is a little bit more of a... It's almost like a whodunit. Especially with regards to finding this sort of real Grandmaster and such. So it's kind of neat to see less of these... so usually you'd get a chance to sort of see the motivations behind the target. And now it's sort of being replaced with sort of revelations in terms of, you know, the next clue as to who's responsible or who your next lead is. So it's I don't necessarily, I can't say if I prefer this method, but I think it's an interesting take. Okay, well, I don't seem to have really many graceful exits other than just to drop. Drop. Do it, ya baby. Anyway, so like one of the urges I need to suppress with the way the U.S. is behaving right now is to go from what is sometimes, you know, a bit of sass against the Americans to an outright dislike of them. because I sort of need to appreciate, you know, out of the subset of people who voted, a majority of them did not vote for the current state of things. All right, I need to get out of here, otherwise I am going to... Otherwise I'm not going to be able to do a stream. It's a shame, like I'm actually playing on the... I'm playing on the staticky, or not the like, the flickery windowed screen, and I'm totally able to... Ow! Oops. But yeah, like it's one of these things where it is, you know, like I am under no illusions as to what the current state of US politics means, and I am bothered by it a lot. But I really do my best not to let that color my interactions with individuals, because like obviously, you know, the choice of the leaders does not, it's never going to reflect, you know, the truest, deepest beliefs of every citizen. Like that is not the point of a democracy. The point of the democracy ideally is where everybody's pissed off because nobody got the perfect answer. Bonjour. Oh, okay. Well, apparently the city guards hate me too now. He was too busy mocking me. But yeah, like the funny thing is, I got a taste of Brexit living in the province of British Columbia. So this will maybe probably be the best explanation that I have as far as how these things go. In British Columbia, we had a government known as the BC Liberals. So it's kind of Westminster system. You vote for a representative in your riding, and you know, whoever has the majority of representatives in the legislature forms the government. Let me in, thank you. And apparently the chest is not here. Well, bad luck for me. So the BC Liberals are sort of a right of center party. And the funny thing is, this is so like I tend to be in this state where usually my conservative friends don't care much for the people I vote for, and my more progressive friends tend to be really convinced that I'm just some like right-wing shill or something like that. But like I really did not like how they handled education, and there were definitely some things that bothered me about the BC Liberals. But one reason why they were able to govern for so long was their political rivals, the NDP, which is an avowedly socialist party. They are a member of the Socialist International, so basically Labour, but probably more pre-Tony Blair Labour, although I suppose Corbyn probably wants to undo sort of the third way policies. But like it's clearly a left party, and they really messed up the last time that they were in government, which basically led to just this absolute like annihilation at the polls. And you know, the BC Liberals basically just they just coasted to victory the first time. And the way that they would govern was they would do all of the stuff that annoys you at the very beginning. And as much as as much as I hate to admit it, and as much as I disagreed with some of their policy decisions, a really important feature of the way that they govern that may be true. I actually don't know that much about Scottish Labour paint bucket. Although I do know the SNP has a kind of an analog in Canada in the form of the Bloc Québécois, but the Bloc Québécois has kind of collapsed, so. But anyways, like, I'll read the journal in a minute, but they'd be pretty effective in terms of governing in the sense that, like, if I had to admit it, the stuff that annoyed me at the beginning of their term would be the medicine kind of policies. Like, you know, it would be cuts to balance the budget, or, you know, whatever particular unpopular thing it is. And as much as I would be mad about it at the time, like, when I reflected on what they actually did, I would have to say that was probably a good choice. Because, like, the other thing too is you can actually look at productivity numbers and GDP and whatnot in BC. Like, that's one of the things that I work on at work. You know, you can actually see an improvement that coincides with the change in government, a really impressive one. So it's sort of like, you know, this stuff worked. Like, it was clearly a province which had gone too far in one direction, and you know, this party had sort of introduced a number of reforms that seemed to have done what they set out to do. And again, it pains me to say that stuff, because I really am not aligned with their politics usually. And then what would happen, of course, is that it's a 4-year term, so you let everybody stop being mad about that, and they you know, and then they eventually bring out the goodies like the tax cuts or the childcare or whatever. And in time for the major elections, so they probably didn't get as big of a majority as the first time that they got in, but they would always win the election. And then this event happened where Canada made an effort to sort of harmonize its tax system. So the way that it works for BC is that there's a federal tax that gets taken, and then there's a provincial tax. And what they were proposing, and there was actually some money given to provinces that wanted to do this, they could bring in a harmonized system, and it would be a value-added tax. So it basically has this efficiency where certain intermediate goods aren't taxed multiple times, and it's one that a lot of other Canadian provinces use. I'm pretty sure the UK uses a VAT system, but BC doesn't. Now, the catch is that one of the drawbacks to the shift is that things that were exempt from provincial tax but not federal tax, they would then be covered by the federal tax. And so they implemented sort of this tax credit system to make sure if you were making under a certain level, you would you'd be compensated for the shift. But by and large, it's like one of these ones where it's like, it's a more sensible tax system. It's, you know, it helps productivity. It does have this side effect of there will be tax that are applied to a few things that aren't anymore, but the government was sort of, it had enough foresight to realize that, like, what needs to be done here is the losers of that need to be compensated rather than abandon a tax system that just about everybody else is using. And there's no economist that I've ever met who said differently. And I actually met a couple of they're not partisans. They're professors who do this sort of thing for a living. And they came out very strongly for it. Now, the drawback here is that this is a fairly complicated policy thing. And it just so happens that, now this is a problem for the Liberals, but basically during the campaign, they said they weren't going to do it. And again, this is just because this is something that there was not popular support for. There was sort of this whole like, oh, it's going to raise the taxes on like haircuts or something like that, which technically true because it's applied. But what tends to happen is the cost of things go down over time. And this is an experiment that's been run in like the Maritimes. So BC Liberals win, and they turn around and say, actually, we're going to implement the harmonized sales tax, this value-added tax. And people were understandably upset. And what happens here is this guy who'd been out of politics for like 20 years leads this campaign for a referendum on the harmonized sales tax. And it's basically one where like the government would need to pay back, you know, some $1 billion or so that the federal government gave them to, you know, to implement the new tax. It would need to completely undo all of this work. Like it's a meaningful thing. And they actually thought it would blow over, and then eventually the premier had to resign because I think there were talks of like doing recall elections and such. So the new premier comes in and she says, we'll do a simple, you know, 50% plus one majority. If a referendum is held and people say we want to get rid of the HST, we'll do it. And you already know where this story's going, despite the fact that any expert could tell you, you know, this is a good tax system. It is intelligently thought out. This story of getting additional costs is not true, and it is specifically designed not to cause it. It is simply adopting the tax system that every other province is bringing. The referendum comes back with a pretty clear go back to the old one. Now, the lesson that I got out of this is that what you need to do for referenda like that is put two questions on. Question number one, do you think the current government is a bunch of scumbags? Question number two is the policy question. Because I feel to a certain extent with Brexit and the HST and, you know, the other referenda that come up on these ones, a lot of people have started to treat these things as like a public opinion polls. Just one second. Excuse me. So like if you sit down and you say, okay, the UK would never separate from, you know, from the Eurozone. Like that'll never happen. Everything's already rigged. Everything's already set up. I'm going to send a message with my vote. Then you wake up and all of a sudden the policy has been adopted. And that definitely happened in BC. And I feel that to a certain extent that happened in the UK as well. And frankly, I think the biggest problem is that governments really need to stop governing this way. Like, it is not a direct democracy that we live in. We live in basically republics where we elect representatives to make decisions on our behalf. And if they do a bad job of it, we don't really have a mechanism and shouldn't have a mechanism to force them to act a certain way in the heat of the moment. What we need to do is have a mechanism that disciplines them, and that's the next election. So like a great example would be the snap election that Theresa May put out. I genuinely thought that both her and Corbyn would be chucked out because, like, looking at that performance, I'm surprised that May's lasted as long as she did, and I genuinely think that any other Labour leader, like, you know, a David Miliband would have won. But it seems that they picked the two people who actually really want to drive the country over that cliff. So I don't know. My take on the British election was very wrong. Like, both people are still in their jobs, and I genuinely don't understand why they are. Anyways, citizens Danton and Robespierre would like to defend their actions and honor before the public attacks of citizen Louvet and company. In these dangerous times, the revolution needs strong leaders, men unafraid of taking the hardest decisions. News of Lafayette, the treacherous dog, having accused and arrested the honorable members of the Paris Commune sent to treat with him, his brave troops' unwillingness to march on Paris has forced him to desert his post and flee through enemy lines. Jacques Crapon's tannery is again looking for laborers, with 10-hour days and paid breaks for vomiting. We're well above the industry standard. Upon the usual untimely death, a small sum will be sent to the worker's family. Marat is dead, citizens, the flame of the revolution is dimmed. The most ardent of us has been viciously assassinated as he sat unwittingly in his bath. We will publish details of the crime as they come to light, but for now let us bow our heads in homage to the greatest of revolutionaries. Amazon fights for the revolution. Readers recall the astonishing Theron de Mericourt, she who leads the crowds at many a revolutionary event. Now she has taken upon it herself to raise a brigade of warrior women. We salute the efforts of this extraordinary woman. All right, and we had a couple of other events, so sorry for the monologue on referenda, guys, but May is basically the Grinch, but you feel there'll be yeah. And like I actually have some sympathy for why she is behaving the way that she is. Like, you know, so the fault lies with David Cameron for entertaining that referendum. And, you know, May has saddled her, like, she has gone down this path of saying, I am not going to be the candidate that does the opposite of what people said. And that should be a valid policy position, right? There was a referendum. There is information about what the electorate thought at that time. And I think there is absolutely a place for a politician to say, this is where we stand. But the answer should be the opposition party, you know, whether they're in the government or in the opposition, should be opposing it. And it feels more like they are abetting. Anyway. Captain Frederick Rouy joined the Garde Française in 1789, just in time to witness the beginning of the Revolution. As the son of a poor cobbler, Rouy had no hope of advancement into the aristocratic officer corps of the Guard, and by the accounts of his contemporaries, Rouy himself left no letters or journals behind and may have been illiterate. The rhetoric of the Revolution found a true believer in him. With the bulk of the Garde Française defected to the Garde Nationale, Rouy was among them. He rose quickly through the ranks, unhindered by his lack of aristocratic breeding, and along with Santerre, was one of the key figures in the storming of Tuileries Palace. He was also a violent, sadistic monster who used revolutionary fervor as an excuse to murder and pillage his way across France. But we all have our faults. I chew my nails. He died at the Concierge prison, killed during the September massacres. Assassins 4, Templars 0. And let's just take a quick look at the miscellaneous. Okay, so don't need the newspaper. Ah!
Dear Arno, I confess I'm not entirely sure what to say here. It was good to see you again. Somehow rings hollow. An empty space unfit to contain the totality of my feelings. And yet I am pleased. Pleased that the assassins have not changed you completely. I suppose
I'll answer that in a second.
You never were one to be easily awed. It seems we have both found ourselves at an impasse in the hunt for my father's killer. Perhaps together, we can accomplish what neither of us could alone. It's nice to think that after all this time, we're still better together than apart. Yours, Elise.
So obviously anytime that a Canadian gains sort of this broader international appeal, that'll be news, and especially something so unusual as like a you know, an academic, an obscure academic all of a sudden sort of becoming an international sensation. So he's definitely the sort of person who you'll see come up in newspapers, whereas in the United States you'll usually see kind of journals that are a little bit more about current affairs. So, you know, like The Atlantic might write something on Peterson, or the New York Times or whatever. So in Canada there's definitely a few more news articles about him. And especially as relates to other events. So I know there was a student who I think was really very supportive of him, and I think they had been disciplined for some reason, specifically because it was Jordan Peterson. And I think he's suing that university now. Like they reversed the decision, but I believe he's suing them now. But I think the coverage in Canada, beyond the stuff that is newsworthy, such as, you know, suing a university for $2 million and the fact that he's a big YouTube sensation, I think the coverage would be pretty consistent with what I see in other areas. So it's, you know, it's a topic that comes up, particularly the appeal or the fact that he's got a bestseller. But in terms of how big is he in Canada, in terms of whether or not like the average person talks about him. I mean, it's kind of hard, especially if you're somebody online, it's sort of hard to avoid. I don't think it was hate speech, but yeah, I could be wrong on that. But I'll be honest, I don't remember the details, so I'll rely on anybody who's looked up. Anyways, it was reversed, and the second play is the suing. But I think, like, if you're somebody who's online, you're gonna have heard of this guy. So I think in the circles that I go through, there are more people have heard of him than not, and kind of everybody has an opinion. But I'm not entirely sure that he is... I'm not quite sure he's breaking through to sort of just the everyman consciousness any more than he is any other location. Like, it's clear, if you click on a Jordan Peterson video on YouTube, the YouTube algorithm basically thinks, you know, that's the only thing you want to watch. But, you know, I'm pretty sure if I were to go to a coffee shop today, you know, if it's near a university, they're probably going to be somebody who hasn't, you know, who knows about Jordan Peterson. If I were to go to a coffee shop, you know, near, I don't even know if there are any factories in Ottawa, but, you know, near that area, I'm sure there'd be a couple of people maybe who'd read about him in the paper, but otherwise don't think too much about it. So I guess the best I could say is I suspect the response to him would be, I think it tracks better with somebody's online activity rather than whether or not they're Canadian. Again, beyond the fact that obviously his actions in Canada are going to carry news. I think it's worth mentioning. There's one other thing I should say. There's a debate series called the Monk Debates. He was invited for one because it was a debate on political correctness, which is a little disappointing. I actually don't think he did very well in it. But Stephen Fry was on his team, so he kind of he balanced out that side. So obviously, you know, I think they'll probably prioritize Canadian invitees to that. And I have a feeling he'll probably try and run for either provincial or federal government at some point, but I don't know. We'll see.
Paris, September 23rd, 1788. Dear Arno, I never thought I could be so bored in Paris. Can you imagine it? The greatest city in the world, and here I am, stuck in endless lectures from dawn to dusk. It's worse than that winter we spent in Strasbourg. Do you remember? When it snowed for a week straight, and we couldn't leave the house, and all the books in the library were in German. We convinced that cook the house was haunted by some young Frankish prince, and the poor man refused to leave his kitchen without a rosary in one hand and a Bible in the other. I miss those days. The things I'm learning from Father's friends are... well, I wish I could tell you about them. Someday, perhaps. But not now. And not like this. But still, I find myself missing those days. Missing home. Missing you. Next time Father comes to Paris, you must persuade him to bring you along. I remain always your Elise. Oh, Arno. What have you done? I know we didn't part on the best of terms, but to go running to the assassins? My father kept you away from them for a reason. Their creed is like wine, sweet enough at first blush, and in moderation it makes life seem more bearable. But drink too deeply, and you find naught but madness and anarchy. No doubt they've already filled your mind with tales of how dreadful we Templars are, that we would make slaves of humanity, and place our boots on the world's neck. You knew my father, and you know me. I can only pray that is enough to give the lie to those tales. My order has turned against me. and I am hunted by those I once called friend. I could not bear it if you turned against me also. Think of me, and be well, Elise.
I know I missed out on a couple of those. Interesting, you mostly hear about PC culture and such through the internet, identity politics in the way that's not taken too seriously yet where you're from, Denmark. Yeah, so this is one of the challenges sometimes faced by that, because I try to... So I think one of the problems I run into in discussions about figures like him, and you can say the same about, you know, about more traditional political figures as well. So if somebody asks you, like, what do you think of Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump or Justin Trudeau or Doug Ford or something like that, usually what somebody's asking is, you know, are you on my side? And, like, at the risk of becoming a pariah amongst a certain group of people, I would say I actually think a Hillary Clinton presidency would not have been the worst thing. There's no way I'm going to catch him. I don't think it would have been the worst thing the world could have seen. It doesn't mean that I like all of her policies, but the biggest thing is that I actually think that she's pretty good on the boring parts of politics. I think she actually probably cares a lot more than anybody else does on things that are like tedious. And I actually think that that's a really appropriate role for government, to like do the sorts of things that, you know, make your life better in small ways. But that's usually not what people talk about, right? Usually what people will talk about is like, do you support healthcare legislation? If you do, you are an irredeemable socialist, or if you don't, you are in the pocket of Big Pharma or whatever. Yeah, so yeah, actually you raise I'm taking a long time to get to the point, but you've kind of anticipated where I'm going with this, Stortugan. One criticism I would have of him, and this is somebody, like, so I've TA'd for quite a few classes, and a tendency that I need to suppress for myself is, like, when I'm in front of a classroom full of people and they are listening to what I have to say, because of course they want to pass the test and such, it is very easy for me to make a statement as a fact where I'm more sort of stating an opinion or something like that. And I have a feeling that Jordan Peterson is actually fairly good in terms of communicating his ideas, but I think he has an unfortunate tendency to sometimes state as facts things that are more speculations or his feelings on the matter, which is totally fine to do in most contexts, but it is an important one, especially when you're a professor, to be a little more careful in delineating. So that's, like, in terms of, like, the phenomena of Jordan Peterson, which is what I think most people are interested in. That's kind of all I have to say about that. The rest of it, really, I kind of need to take on an individual point. So, like, the stuff that he's talking about in terms of political correctness, I was a bit surprised when I came to Ontario in terms of how the Ontario Liberal government, it's felt like there was a lot of regulation. And especially I'm talking about being in BC, where there was sort of a center-right party that was governing. Like, I'm not going to experience that much regulation. So that surprised me. But this idea that he could have gone to jail for some of the things that he said in his YouTube videos, and that, from what I understand, is not true. And I don't want to say made up, because, I mean, I genuinely don't know this topic as well. But to my understanding, the credibility of the claim that he would go to prison for not respecting people's pronouns was not a true one. But again, like, if you're making a rhetorical point, it's easy to have that line sort of blur. Now, I know, like, in Canada, sort of Justin Trudeau's kind of become the poster child of political correctness, and I know, like, when he So there's, like, to give you an example of how poisoned some of this dialogue can be, he made a joke where I think, well, somebody said something like, you know, for all mankind, and he said, oh, we prefer people kind. And there's no like neutral viewer who would ever take that as him being serious in correcting this person. What he was doing was making fun of kind of the politically correct stereotype. But what happened was the Conservative Party and, you know, everybody on YouTube picked up on that line as being serious. And I mean, again, like, I have the benefit of being, you know, somebody who follows this stuff reasonably closely. So, you know, I know exactly the way that he meant it. And I mean, obviously when he talks about having a feminist foreign policy, like, that's a different, I was meaning to write a blog about that actually and what that's supposed to mean. But I would suggest, my perception of Canada at the very least is the Canada that Peterson talks about in terms of it being this, like, you know, neo-Marxist nightmare. I'm not entirely sure that's a fair characterization of my country, or my province for that matter. But as you say, like, there definitely seems to be a really weird alignment between a certain type of thinker that really wants to push his ideas, and because on individual things, I definitely just go, like, I can usually tell if somebody's been watching his videos, but like normally on a case-by-case basis, I prefer to talk to the topic, right? So, I mean, like, I read Joseph Campbell Once Upon a Time, so if they want to talk about, you know, mythologies or what have you, I can work on that. And if somebody wants to talk about political correctness in Canada, I'll do my best. But the biggest problem is I don't have a lot invested in those issues. I've actually learned more about the people who are more pro-political correctness. I've actually learned more about their beliefs in this year than I'd really ever considered before, which I think is good, because I think it's better if we actually have conversations with people about this stuff rather than just yell at each other. And Paint Bucket says in Scotland, you can get arrested for mean tweets or jokes. That's horrifying. The Patriot 1793. The king confined to Paris. The assembly has acted for the safety of France, knowing that our enemies already massed at our borders would pounce if they could but secure Louis' permission. The Legislative Assembly has declared itself unfit to proceed with the governing of the nation. Given recent dramatic events, a new national convention is to be elected, more suited for the challenges ahead. Rabble-rouser Camille Desmoulins continues to publish the rag sheet Le Vieux Cordier. We don't begrudge anyone the right to print their opinions, but hasn't he enough blood on his hands? Can't he finally be silenced? And a fierce Corsican heart is burning with true Republican fire. The young artillery commander Napoleon Bonaparte is the man to watch. Now of officer rank, a bright and humble military career lies ahead of this citoyen. We entrust the Republic into his valiant hands. Yeah, I was curious if that's what Paint Bucket was referring to. I'd really just want to go down the stairs, Arno. Thank you. All right, let's see if I can find this chest. I'm probably going to have to wrap it up soon, guys. So sorry it turned into kind of an AMA on... Actually, so the thing I regret is that if it counted as an AMA, I was really political with my answers rather than being able to like really get into the depth of that. So if you guys do want to talk about this stuff, I'll do my best to cover it in a future chat. But I know a lot of this was more sort of a back and forth with you guys rather than gameplay. I'm not quite ready to go now, but I may not be able to start another. Memory. It's a very French. Ooh. All right, let's see if it's a level below, because I hear the tinkling. Oh, and it's a level 2. Actually, you know, there might be an interesting example I can pull out of this, because I remember having a conversation with someone about, I don't ever think it was in the context of Jordan Peterson, but it was on the identity politics thing, which I find kind of interesting, because I don't understand the concept of identity politics particularly well. I've heard a lot of criticisms of it, but I haven't... Like, the problem that I have when I hear a lot of criticisms of something, I'm obviously not getting an account of it that is necessarily interested in portraying it in the most sympathetic light. But what really interested me was it was also in the context of political correctness, and I think somebody made the point of saying, it's like, well, you know, you seem like a smart guy. You know, I'm curious what you think about X. And I think they'd made the point of, like, I'm not 100% sure what they were trying to say, but I think they said something to the effect is like, you know, I don't think that because of identity politics, you know, I should be made to feel bad because I am a white man or something like that. And I find that a pretty reasonable statement. Oh, just a second. So I find that a reasonable statement on its own. And I think there can definitely be a tendency of some people to do something to the effect, you know, well, you know, because you fit to this category, this identity, I'm assuming, you know, you should feel bad or whatever. But I'm not entirely sure that requires a grounding in being opposed to X topic or Y topic, right? So if, like, basically what I mean by this, if somebody says, okay, so identity politics is saying that, you know, you system chalk because you have white skin and clearly a deeply masculine voice, you know, you should feel bad. And I'm like, well, you know, I'm sure I should feel bad for a lot of things, but I'm not entirely sure my, you know, my inherited characteristics are one of them. But the thing about this for me is that I'm not entirely sure I require this vast intellectual framework to, you know, to oppose this. I can just say it's like, well, I don't see a lot of value in making a judgment based on my appearance in terms of what my individual beliefs are. You know, if there's a particular belief that I have that you find troublesome, we can maybe deal with that. And I think when I've talked with people who would probably count as being of a more politically correct bent, I think one thing that they do talk about in terms of identities is to sort of say that they're sort of avoiding the same thing, which is that in a given group, you know, I'm just trying to think of the best way for me to, you know, to explain this. If there are a certain set of assumptions made about someone, so, you know, similar to my complaint of like, well, I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to be made to feel bad for something that I don't have any control over. They, you know, they're essentially sort of saying the same thing here. It's like, one of the problems is that if you use a certain term, so, you know, I think a perfect example here would be there are clearly some really derogatory terms for homosexuality which probably don't have any place in modern discourse. You know, as soon as somebody uses a term like that, that is immediately assigning a set of beliefs and intentions to us where there's no business. And of course, the drawback there is that it's, you know, like, that particular example is difficult to deal with because I think by and large we've kind of gotten over it. We sort of know not to call people really derogatory terms for their sexual preferences. But you know, take your pick of these examples. So the difficulty here, of course, is that I don't find anything too objectionable with that view either. But clearly somewhere between these two very reasonable statements, somebody feels that they're being made to feel bad because they have a certain skin color, and another group is sort of feeling that free license is being given to use derogatory terms, or, you know, certain assumptions are being made about their behavior. Which is why, as anodyne as it sounds, is why I really tend to prefer. So, like, it seems to me, actually, Stortugan says, you consider yourself center-left, center-leaning guy, you dread PC culture, identity politics becoming standard fare. It seems that it divides more than solves, and it could alienate a lot of potential voters. You all for common decency. Yeah, so a decent example, I think, here would be... So, again, this term identity is a little slippery for me sometimes. Because I think in some cases there's an effort made to create these identities, such as did you support Trump? Did you support Clinton? Do you like Jordan Peterson? Do you listen to Stephen Fry? Do you, so on and so forth, right? These are, these questions are less about what do you think or how should we organize society in a way that we can all get along, and they're a little bit more, are you on my side? And that, in some cases that's fine, right? You want to know, you want to take the measure of somebody that you're talking with. But I think one of the challenges that I tend to find is that when I hear a lot of these... So I think, and again, this might be because of my lack of understanding of identity politics, but one of the things that worries me the most about a lot of the dialogue that I hear is that the conversation about identity politics really seems to be a boogeyman, and I've not really heard... So usually what I wind up doing if ever I get sort of roped into a conversation about it, I do my best to try and get a very clear understanding of what is meant. Because again, like the guy, if the person, the great example here would be that person I chatted with, really the only person I've had an extended chat in terms of these issues with. Like when they say, is like, I just don't think I should be made to feel bad because I have white skin. And I'm like, I absolutely, that strikes me as a purely unobjectionable point of view. And the drawback is that the people I know who would very likely consider themselves to be, I don't know if you can say you're pro-identity politics, but like people who probably are the ones he's talking about, when I've chatted with them, I've never really felt that that was where they were going with this. I mean, maybe just somebody's being dishonest with me, but I like to assume the most. I mean, it's not that I'm a decision maker in any of these cases, right? I'm having a chat about things that are clearly important to them. But I think one of the things that worries me is that with this idea of identity, if a boogeyman's being created in the form of, you're pro-PC or pro-identity, it seems like it's an effort to kind of create a set of identities and a group of alliances on their own. And that always concerns me. And for the simple reason that I think it's really easy to get a group of people. It's like that example we were talking about with the HST. It's very easy to get a group of people really worried about something. The HST is going to raise the price of your haircuts. Or, you're going to have to pay full tax on books, is another one that I had to deal with. And, I suppose because I tend to be a little bit more of, I'd like to consider myself sort of a free speech guy and what have you. Because I sort of understand that there is a benefit to being wrong and having someone correct you, or because, I don't think it's possible to encounter a corrupting idea and that you're irredeemably destroyed, that, it is possible to read odious things and to be able to walk away from them, understanding that they're bad and why they're bad, and coming up with your answer as to why, why what was said was beyond the pale. Please take him out. I failed the mission. But yeah, I think because I do have this belief, you know, whatever side you fall on it, is like, surely we're not at a point where we believe that the mere speech act, you know, being told the heresy is enough to convert you into a true believer. I tend to sound very wishy-washy, but I really do make an effort to pin someone down and say, so specifically, what are you objecting to? Because I sometimes think if I don't do that, I just wind up agreeing with everyone. So, anyways, what else did we have? We have an interesting case in Scotland with sectarian culture, which has existed for hundreds of years. It stems from a deep hatred between Protestants. Oh God, yes. That's a great, actually, you know, there's an old joke, I think Christopher Hitchens told this, where it's like, you know, somebody gets stopped in, like, I think it's like Belfast or wherever, and, you know, masked guy points at him at gunpoint is like, you know, a Catholic or Protestant. It's like, I'm Jewish atheist, actually. It's like, well, Catholic atheist or Protestant atheist? Like, it is less. I probably suspect that the average Scot or average Irishman probably does not have overwhelmingly strong views on, say, transubstantiation. But you better believe that there's, you know, there's going to be some pretty strong feelings in terms of whether they state, you know, what church they go to. But I mean, with that in mind, I think we at least have some common cause in the idea that we prefer not to have division. I skipped over Sin's comment, which I regret. Sorry for lurking in silence, but you do agree it's frustrating and counterproductive to ostracize potential allies or innocent parties as villains just because of what they identify as. Yeah, and it's, I mean, again, I think the biggest thing is that I've been on a university campus, and I definitely have people that I have pretty strong disagreements with politically or even just, like, philosophically. But I don't think I could charitably say to them that that disagreement stemmed from what would traditionally be called identity politics. And I think they were sometimes a little short with some of the examples that I would put up, but I also think that they were very tolerant of what I had to say. Like, I would say my piece, you know, they would listen, and I did notice I would get interrupted a couple of times, but, like, beyond, like, this is the thing, if this is just a simple debate about politeness, like, I don't know, let me just play the full privilege card, right? As a, you know, as a white-skinned, cisgendered male, you know, educated, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, I don't really know what other terms I can assign to myself. Like, I have grown up. Like, I can handle somebody saying something mean about my, you know, yeah, so if somebody wants to call me something mean because of my background, you know, fine. Like, I'm sort of strong enough to be able to stomach that. I think they're a bit of an idiot. You know, it's like how you handle a bore at a party. Like, you may not necessarily be able to forcibly eject them from the premises without, like, ruining the party, but I won't invite them back. But, like, if I deal with somebody who's impolite with me, I don't really feel the need to, like, go on a crusade. It's just sort of like, okay, well, that guy was a bit of a jerk, and, you know, I've learned my lesson. I won't invite them back. And, you know, I don't consider that to be deplatforming. I consider that to be more, you know, I don't like hanging around this person, and I'm not obligated to you know, to invite them. That's disgraceful. I'm not obligated to invite them back. Is kind of how I take. What are you doing, sir? Okay, well, whatever he's doing, it's really effective to me avoiding my clutches. There we go. But, Anyways, I feel like I've crashed and burned this cast into the dirt. I'm probably saying very basically borderline platitudes on probably very serious topics that I don't know a lot about, and I didn't do a mission in the time that I could have. So I'm going to load up on my consumables. I am about 10 minutes late. I am actually due to meet up with somebody downtown, and it takes me... I think if I walk really quickly, it'll probably take me about 45 minutes, so I should still be able to meet them on time. But I do regret I am going to have to cut this a little bit shorter. I'm probably ending about 40 minutes early. So I apologize. I know I introduced a bunch of topics that people... Well, I responded to a bunch of topics that people have a really big investment in, and I didn't deal with them in the fullest terms. If you do have questions along these lines and you're interested just in my take, quote unquote, you can always reach out on Twitter. I'll do my best to answer as honestly as possible. You may get a threaded answer, but you know, that's the drawback of you know, the character limit. But I did want to take a second and say thank you guys for hanging out and sharing Assassin's Creed Unity with me. I'm liking... I kind of feel like if they cut out the first 4 chapters and started here, I would have liked the game a lot more. But I'm still not getting over the controls, but this is... I'm warming to this game quite a bit. And I'm gonna look forward. I do have a bit of a long weekend coming up, so if I can get a makeup Assassin's Creed Unity cast in, I will do my best to accommodate that. But in the meantime, I'm gonna find somebody to host. I wish you all a wonderful evening, and we will do this. We'll do this again soon. At the very latest, I will be back on Friday for. Holy smokes! Sheriff Eli's playing Battlefield 5. I'm really tempted to host him, but I think it's better for me to host Ponce, who is playing Slay the Spire again. So yeah, feel free, if you want to know what's happening with the cast, feel free to follow on Twitter. I usually announce when I'm going live there, or if I have any special plans. If I can, I'll do another Assassin's Creed Unity stream where I do a little bit more of the material and try to talk a bit more about the Revolution. I do have a book recommendation because it seems like there's a few people who have not read Tale of Two Cities. If you can, it's a pretty straightforward read. I think it's like grade 10 level reading in Canadian high schools. I think it's a pretty good book, and it should also be available free online. I'm pretty sure he's not asking for royalties anymore. But we are going to host Ponce tonight. He's playing Slay the Spire again, and Ponce is a dear friend from Vancouver. I know I didn't do a great job on my shout-outs today, but you can see him for yourself. We're tired of System Talk, heard this place was better. I'm probably going to use the Twitch raid function. Oh, nope.